Welcome to Strength in Leos.
What is up, party people? It's Evan back with the Strength in Leos podcast. Super excited to bring you guys another episode, and especially this episode. I love doing roundtable talk episodes, and we've actually had 2 in a row, which is super awesome. So I'm glad to be back and giving this episode to you guys. And on this roundtable talk, this is actually our 5th one that we've done with Strength in Leos, and this one is featuring Seth Hoffpauir and Heidi Nielsen of Xeno Gecko Morphs. So super excited to have these great friends on the podcast, awesome breeders who work with very amazing high quality stuff, and they're just super knowledgeable and very, very passionate about gecko breeding, as you will hear in this podcast, and you probably will see on Facebook and Instagram as well. So love talking to them as always. We talk all the time, and glad to have them back on the podcast for this roundtable talk on breeding ethics and also just common mistakes that a lot of people are making in the hobby that, you know, we thought that we should just bring to light and just our ideas on that. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it, and here it is. And before we go on, I want to say thank you to our sponsors. The Blessed Gecko over the last 5 years has acquired an incredible variety of geckos from some of the top genetics available. In the past, they have maintained all animals within their own collection as holdbacks, as they have taken time to observe genetic pairings, dispositions, sizes, coloration, patterning, and etc. Go check them out on Facebook and Instagram, and of course go check out what they have available for sale. Impeccable Gecko is a small to mid-sized, family-operated, hobbyist breeder operation. They specialize in leopard geckos with high-quality genetics. At Impeccable Gecko, integrity and animal welfare is above all else. Miles Schwartz works with some awesome morphs and lines that are not only high quality, but also fairly rare in the hobby. Go check out their social media and awesome YouTube channel. John Scarborough of Gecko Boa Reptiles has kept and bred more than 80 species of reptiles, and his focus has turned to specializing within the genus Eublepharus. He has worked hard to pioneer some of the most cutting-edge leopard geckos while maintaining genetic purity and honesty. Go check out their website for their most up-to-date availability, and don't forget to follow all of their social media. Suburban Geckos is operated by Chris Charlton. Chris's passion and enjoyment for herpetoculture, and more specifically leopard geckos, drove the desire to take his hobby to the next level. Suburban Geckos treats every animal with the utmost care and respect, and cut no corners when it comes to the health and integrity of their geckos. Suburban Geckos is a strong supporter of the Strength in Leos podcast, so follow them on social media and check out what they have available for sale. Grove Geckos is a family-owned and oriented medium-scale leopard gecko business. Lance Musgrove is a hobbyist breeder with the goal of producing healthy, visually stunning, and refined genetics for their geckos. They can be found online at grovegeckos.com or on social media like Facebook and Instagram. Give them a follow and reach out to Lance at any time. Spotty-tailed Geckos is a small hobbyist breeder that focuses on quality genetics and maintaining excellent husbandry. Andy got started in the hobby when his daughter wanted a pet leopard gecko. He immediately fell in love with the animals and the hobby. Andy started breeding his first leopard geckos in 2015. To this day, he keeps a very small collection sourced from top-tier breeders. How's it going, everybody? It's Evan back with Strength in Leos. Super excited for this next episode that we've been planning for quite a while now. Had a few scheduling mishaps that we've had, but we're finally back on here. And we have a awesome roundtable for you guys. Heidi and Seth are back for this episode. So how are you guys doing today? Welcome back to the podcast.
What's up, Evan?
Hey, Evan.
Heidi, you don't sound too excited.
I'm very, very excited. I just want my phone to fall.
We had some technical difficulties getting everybody on today, but I think we're good now. And yeah, excited to have both of you guys on to the podcast. It's been a while since we've had a roundtable with both of you guys, so I'm excited to have a great convo with you guys today.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Cool. So
yeah, we're supposed to do this, what, like 3 weeks ago, and I totally punked out on y'all.
Seth is on his old man time, so I'm just messing with y'all.
Dude, hey, no lie, I don't know if I told y'all, but remember I canceled, what was it? It was a Monday we were supposed to do it, right?
Yeah.
I think it was a Monday, and I had just had an expo the weekend before. I canceled that, and like the next, I think it was the Tuesday or the Wednesday of that same week, I took 2 naps during the day. I don't take naps ever. Like I think I legit am getting old now. Like I was apparently I was really behind on sleep because I thought I was getting sick at first, but turned out I was just tired.
Well, you had how many shows did you have the week before or following up to that week?
Well, we had 2 back-to-back. We had our 2 biggest shows of the year, actually. It was Conroe Herps show and then Arlington NARVC.
Wow.
Back-to-back. So,
well,
yeah, it was a
sense.
stressful couple weeks. So, yeah, I was tired.
That's crazy. So what other updates do you guys have? I know it's been a while since we did the last podcast. We had, the breeding season is pretty much over for a lot of people. What other updates do you guys want to catch everybody up on since the last time we talked?
Well, speak for yourself, Evan. Fat tails go year round, man. I pulled 6 eggs today and pulled one of the boys' gargoyle babies. No, we're rocking and rolling over here.
Wow. How about you, Heidi? How are you still going? I guess Seth is full-time breeder now, so all year round, it's full swing.
Yeah, he's hatching now. I haven't hatched anything since August, so right now it's just grow out, collecting pullbacks, and getting ready for the next couple of expos.
Nice. I know we have a few expos in Wisconsin, so which ones are you planning on vending to end the year out?
Well, I do Sewer Fest every year. I did in August, and then there's another one in November. Hopefully you can make it to this time so we can hang out. And then there's another one in the Show Me Reptiles and Exotics. I've done that a couple times now. And then there's a new one, I think it's the Northern Wisconsin Expo. They're having one in Fond du Lac. I believe it's like October 17th. So I'll be doing that one as well.
Nice. Cool. So back on the season, how did you guys, I guess that's still going, but in general, how do you guys think this year went in terms of hatchlings, your projects? How do you guys think this season's going, and how it went with what you guys hatched this year?
Awesome. Got some awesome stuff this year.
Yeah.
And Seth and I did that collab, so we're splitting all that, and those are all very cool.
You guys should just send it all to me. You guys can do the pairing again next year.
You don't have any room, Evan. I tried to send you an extra gecko the other day.
That's true. Once these new racks come in. I was just telling Heidi I'm ordering a bunch of new racks, so got 4 new racks coming next month. So after that,
just waiting on mine.
lots of cool bold stripes and every flavor from you guys this year, and Seth, awesome AFTs too. So looking forward to see what you guys hatch next year.
Yeah.
Thanks,
man. Yeah, I'm.
Now.
Yeah. Now Evan's got both stripes too.
I know.
No, I've been real happy with everything Leo wise over here this year, and we're pretty much wrapped up on Leos. I think I have another 3 or 4 cooking still from some of my later girls that were going, but then Fat Tails were on pace with right where we planned on being right now. Held back a bunch of stuff the last couple of years, so that's just on the brink for next year, kind of already phasing into making pairings for the beginning of next season for the Fat Tail stuff. So
nice. Well, I know, Seth, we had a episode that we did pretty recently, and a lot of people tuned into that episode. So do you have any updates on that, and how people perceive that, and any feedback you got from people off that last episode?
Nothing. All good, man. A couple people reached out. More of the same people that had animals that they thought might have been subject to the same kind of conditions, and some of them probably are just people being overcautious about stuff, but it's I'm still watching that third animal that showed me issues. She seems to be getting worse and worse, so it's just confirming my decision even more. So yeah, that's all been pretty chill. I've been kind of just trickling those animals out as pet onlys. I usually just bring them to the expos and kind of make sure they go to the right person that's definitely not ever going to be breeding them.
Yeah.
That's my main goal there with the animals that are from that original project. And yeah, as far as updates on other stuff, finally got ammo patties hatched over here. I think last time I talked to you, we were hoping for some, and I think it was like the next week I had my first clutch from one of those pairings. Both of them hatched out at ammo patty. So
you got 2, right?
That was pretty cool.
So
yeah, two so far, and lots more on deck from that same project. So
nice.
Hopefully we get some more to have several different shades of orange to choose from. Already these first 2, one of them's seems a little bit brighter than the other. So it's gonna be neat to watch those grow.
Nice. Yeah. That color that they came out with, it was like just insane. It was like a super orange, like sherbet. I don't even know how to explain it, but man.
Yeah, I think Heidi and I have joked about it before. Whenever, always with Leos, I've never really had any interest in just the plain Tang Leos, because I just felt like an orange gecko is what I always said. And then it's funny that once I dove head first, really deep into fat tails, that ended up being one of my main goals that I wanted to achieve was an orange fat tail. I don't know why it's so much different for me, but I guess it's just a matter of rarity for in my eyes. I don't know.
Yeah, I gotta distance myself from you guys because you guys got me into bolds and already starting up a bold collection. Now Seth's probably going to get me into AFTs in the next couple of years.
Oh, you need a fat tail, Evan. You definitely need a fat tail.
Oh, man. I don't know. There's just, I don't know. The Morphs are so much different than Leo's. So it's like, I don't know. The Whiteout Oreo stuff is super cool. The email patty is like stunning. So I don't even know where I'd start.
There's a lot of stuff that we still haven't even seen yet either.
Yeah.
Evan, there's
tons of combos.
There's so much on the brink because a lot of people are just, really getting into them on the level of line breeding and refining and combos and stuff like that. So
right,
I think they're in their infancy still. We're going to see a lot of cool stuff coming out of that scene soon.
For sure. Heidi, do you have fat tails?
Yeah. I have a small group. I think the last 2 years I bred like just 2 or 3.
Okay.
I'll probably have a couple like normal het Oreos at the expo. Some little juveniles. Otherwise, I was just going to let everybody grow out because I like to keep them like probably like 2 years before I even breed them.
Yeah.
So we'll just hold on longer. The ones I had last year, I didn't breed this coming winter, so I'll probably wait till next year again for that. They're getting close to 40 grams, I believe, though.
Nice. I think we got to give you a new nickname. We're gonna call you like Holdback Heidi or something because you don't like letting go of anything.
I just let go of because people have been asking, so I finally let go of a Tremper bull stripe in the first one of these.
Did she sell yet?
And I'm like, no, I have a lot of interest, but I haven't gotten the deposit yet. So I'm like, if she doesn't sell, like there's only a little bit of window that I can still ship this year.
I almost messaged you about her whenever you posted her. She kind of would fit into this little albino project I'm about to start up over here.
Well, and they're so different because I have some that are like that.
Right? No, she's more that pastel look.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I get pastel ones, and then I'm specifically breeding a separate group for the tangerine stuff. But I want the contrast to stick because I don't like a lot of, the vinyl tangerine stuff. It's cool when it's younger because of all the contrast, but then it hypes up completely as adults. And I just don't care for that. So I'm hoping to keep it. And so far, the adults from last year have kept the story of it. So this year, so keep it on.
That gem, that crazy, like amazing gem that you just sold that we were talking about. Like, even the home it went to wasn't even a breeder. And it's like...
Yeah, well, I had her listed for not even 48 hours, and I had a bunch of messages from other breeders, and then this one chick comes along and has this fancy Zen-like thing, and is going to spoil her as a pet.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that was super, super awesome to see. Like, just people not like getting into higher end geckos. I think I've seen that trend too over like the last couple of years. Just people getting into higher end geckos just to spoil them as pets.
the last expo we had, I had a girl walk up to the table and looked at all my bowls, and she picked out the nicest female on my table. Actually, I'm sorry, it was a male, but it doesn't matter. One of the nicest bowls on my table, and I had it, $300 show price, but all kind of geckos, $100, $150, $200, cheaper than that, and that's the one she wanted. It was a pet, and she was spending her own. I think she had just graduated high school or something, or her mom mentioned graduation money, and that's what she wanted, was that one right there. And people know what they like.
Nice.
But yeah, I agree. I think that trend is starting to catch on more and more. People are realizing that you do get what you pay for, and kind of willing to spend that extra money on the nicer animals, visually and health wise.
Yeah. Heidi, have you seen that trend too? And just in general, like through, Xeno Gecko Morphs, then also just through like the Leopard Gecko Club page. Have you seen that pretty much too?
Yeah, I remember actually I think when we did our roundtable last year, we were saying how it's been, like, we've been noticing that, like, we'll be at the expo or even just locally, people ask what I have. Locals, for the most part, seem to want just kind of the lower end stuff, because it's mainly for pets, not breeding. And people are like, the picture, and I'm like, well, that one's like 300, and they're like, okay, like, they're totally up for it. And same thing at the expo. I have a lot of people that they want a pet, they'll come and pick her out and they'll pay for it, and then they'll go and buy everything that I kind of tell them, what would be appropriate for like a beginner or whatever, or I refer them to the page. But yeah, we get, even in the group, we get a lot of people looking for something specific now, and they want to know what the best breeders are. They don't want to go to a chain store. They don't want to go to like, there's a handful of like the top breeders everyone recommends, like top 4 or 5, but then there's a lot of like newer breeders that have been around for just a couple of years, and they're doing killer work. They're doing all their research. They're getting quality animals from other breeders that are reputable in the hobby. So it's nice to be able to start talking about other people. And even on Instagram, there's a couple of breeders I'm following that it's their first season, and they're just doing awesome. Taking in all the advice, doing right by their animals, not breeding them immediately. So it's nice to see that it's going somewhat in a positive direction as of late.
Yeah, so that's another thing that I also wanted to bring up. We've seen a lot of, in the gecko hobby, we see a lot of drama and reptiles in general. A lot of people doing certain things that maybe a majority of the bigger breeders don't necessarily agree with in terms of like ethics. So how have you guys seen that trend? So since maybe like the last time we talked in terms of breeders, and how do you see, like, do you see more quality breeders? Do you guys see, kind of like a stagnation in breeders? What's your opinion on that?
A little bit of both. I think I've seen, some people come in. I think we've seen some people come in, like Heidi said here recently, that are definitely showing promise. Have the right attitude, have the right idea, have the right, seem to have the right general sense of ethics and morals. And then you have others that have been on the scene for years and have been doing things wrong for years, or wrong by some people's standards, wrong by my standards anyway, and just continue to do things that way. So I think it's gonna always be that way. You're always gonna have different mindsets and different views on things.
I do like that the majority is shifting, though. There's a lot more newer breeders that are on the right path so far. So that's been kind of nice. And then what the other thing, too, is the newer breeders especially are a lot more active in the other groups and willing to help others. A lot of other breeders that have been doing it 10 plus years, they don't really help anybody. They post their stuff and carry on about their day. They don't really... I mean, I don't know what they do personally, I suppose, but like, I'm on my group as much as I can, helping with the most random questions, basic questions, and then my messenger goes off however often. So I'm helping people all over the place if I can. Or ask, if I need advice, I usually just ask Seth. We kind of powwow about that, but it is nice that there's been, you know, an abundance of new breeders coming up, and they're very active in the community, and they're trying to get everything situated before they just start breeding. Like a few years ago, they came out of nowhere. They don't know how to label or ID anything. They have all these intricate morphs or faulty genetics that they're working with, and it's like, why, like, you know, we should have kind of talked about this beforehand, so I don't know. But now I'm not seeing that as much. Maybe I'm just not in those groups anymore, but definitely I feel seeing more.
Well, to be fair, I saw one girl this year that's you know, like you're talking about, just asking some of the most basic questions, and she's got like black knights and all kind of stuff. Like she just got in this year, and it's just spending high end money is one thing, but like really diving in deep and hard, you know, right out the gate, I just feel like that's a recipe for disaster. Because you're trying to deal with a whole different level of.
I kind of think when it comes to that too. I mean, and it's not that the animals aren't beautiful, black knights, whatever. I still don't personally care for solid animals, you know, solid color and contrast, but I can see the appeal. They are neat. But I feel like when people go straight to that and they're breeding them and trying to sell them, I feel it kind of feels like a greed factor, because they don't really care about it. They just know it's the most expensive animal, and they're pushing it constantly. Or, you know, taking deposits on stuff they don't have yet. We would see that all the time. Oh, I have black knights I'm carrying next year, and I'm starting to take deposits. Like, that is so uncool.
Yeah.
Before they even hatch. Yeah.
Well, before they even have eggs or do the breeding, like,
Oh, yeah.
you know, it's
Trying to make that money back as quick as they can.
Yeah.
And then they post 3 months later, oh, my female only laid 3 clutches and only one of them was good, you know, and you know.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy to see just people's lack of patience, I think, when it comes to breeding. I think they see, like, I think especially in Facebook groups, a lot of people have kind of this pre-recognition of what breeding is when it comes to geckos and all this stuff, but they don't really see a lot of, like, the learning that takes place. And a lot of that learning isn't just, you could go ahead and, like, you know, learn every single morph, how they work, if they're recessive or dominant and all of that. But until you really get to breeding, it's like a totally different story when it comes to leopard geckos.
Yeah. I have patience for days. I will grow stuff out for years. I don't care. Because that's the point, is you're trying to better the animal in every way, aside from just their looks. So you want to see, if I'm starting a project I've been working on 6 years, outcrossing a little bit, I want to see personally how they're still doing in 3-4 years, how they're still looking. So it's like, oh, this baby is super cool at 6 months old, but what is it going to look like in 2 years? What is it going to, how is its behavior going to be, or, you know.
Everything looks good at 25 grams.
Yeah.
Right.
Because they're the coolest, you know, those first, it's kind of that 3 to 9 months, they probably look the coolest visually when people are selling them. They still have bands that are fading out, so they have all this purple yet, or, you know, whatever it is. And then, you know, that's almost all gone when they're older, depending on what it is. So there's only a few people that I see with projects that they have generations of that grew out, and like that, those are the people I love to follow, because it's like, you can see the difference. You know, people are just, you know, they have all these tangerines, and it's like, you know, some may be a shade lighter or darker or nearly red. But for the most part, I've seen a lot of them that once they're a few years old, after breeding a couple years, they're just faded. And I don't know if that comes back or not, because I don't keep any like that, so I'm not really sure. But some of my gold stripes, like my main girl Xeno, seems to be getting bolder every year. So same thing with Jade, the gem smell that I got from Seth. Like, her boldness just keeps getting like more spread out, like kind of like ink, kind of just spreading.
Wow.
So which I love.
So there's a comparison I like to make. I think Heidi and I have talked about it before. You know, she's talking about growing stuff out, you know, and not selling it 10, 15 grams or even before then, or taking deposits on stuff as soon as it hatches. You know, I think that there's obviously several different types of breeders in the hobby, but specifically you have two big different groups, and one of those is breeders and creators and people who are trying to like work towards and achieve something and have a plan and a project in mind. And then you have reproducers who, you know, are going to buy a nice pair of said line or whatever and just never keep anything. Basically, they're just reproducing more of the same thing and selling them as soon as they hatch. And you know, there's nothing wrong with either way. It's just you're only going to go so far on, you know, in that reproduction side, because you're producing the same thing over and over, and you're also always selling off your best ones if you're not ever keeping anything, you know, so you're never going to improve the project of the line. So that's just two different ways of looking at it that I think is a big factor.
Yeah. I think that's a really great example. And I think we've also talked about this before, where it doesn't take anybody special to, like, you know, drop a couple $1,000s on some racks and some geckos and reproduce them. Like, it really doesn't take, you know,
they're literally the easiest reptile there is to reproduce. Right,
exactly. Like a 12-year-old can do it. Like, you know what I mean? But it's like really those people who, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, it doesn't take that much, you know, effort to do it, but it's really those people who, like you guys, who are really, you know, looking to improve what they already have and create new things and, you know, just really push the envelope when it comes to breeding. It's really, you know, those are the breeders that you really want to work with, that you really want to learn from, because they just have so much more effort that they put into it and have so much more knowledge because they really put in the hard work to, you know, just create awesome projects and lines that they've been working on for, you know, years that they have now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I always try to, if people are interested in breeding, I always encourage them as long as it's a genuine interest, because it's like, you know, anyone can breed, but not everybody should breed. Like, it's not like I'm just going to get, you know, some of the most expensive morphs, and then even not even just leopard geckos. I know a few people that they want to buy some, you know, this kind of expensive lizard and these kind of snakes, breed them and sell them immediately. They're selling females, still grab it because they got enough, you know, like that just is not cool. And so I don't like those type of breeders that are just in it to produce and sell, you know, as fast as they can. Like your overproduction or whatever it is, like that doesn't make sense to me. It's like you're no better than the milk breeders that are just shipping off to Petco and whatever condition. So it's like, you know, take some responsibility.
Well, inevitably, that's the same breeders that have their geckos on the tables at the expos for next to nothing. You know, they're basically giving them away, and you know, and then that has all its other consequences to it. You know, depending on how cheap they're giving them away, you now have people that are buying them for so cheap that they're thinking of them as a throwaway pet. You know, and then you know you've also got the market itself. If depending on, you know, there's some breeders that are producing high end stuff and overproducing out of their beyond their means and having to do exactly that, you know, and it hurts the market at those shows. It hurts the market in general. It's just, you know, it's not responsible.
Yeah, and I'm all about, like, at an expo especially, or like a local sale, especially if it's someone I've been talking to a while, particularly if it's like youth, I'm very much willing to negotiate pricing to get them a healthy gecko, something that they want and are going to be proud of. I'm not just sitting here giving stuff away. There's, you know, always some room for negotiation, but if you're that worried about $30-$40, it doesn't make me feel like you're going to be able to take care of it properly, because like you're trying to get the most minimal stuff. It's not like they're going to get a big fancy enclosure, but they need the cheapest gecko. Like, that may be the case sometimes, but that's typically not what happens. And luckily, I don't have to deal with going on a buy-sell page and seeing my geckos being rehomed that I've sold.
Yeah, there's different scenarios there. You know, you could have a kid walk up to your table and he's been saving his own money up and he's been, you know, mowing lawns or whatever, and you know, I've got $200 to work with, you know. But I really like this gecko. Like Heidi said, I'll work with a kid like that big time and really hook him up if I know that he's going to spend the rest of that money on his enclosure, you know, and the money that he's going to save with me is going to go directly into the care of that gecko, and that's not a big deal to me, because I in most cases feel pretty good about the fact that the parents are going to step in financially if that gecko needs to go to the vet or something. You know what I mean? But they're trying to teach that kid a sense of responsibility, and in that alone. So I respect that a lot, and I'll definitely make some big adjustments there.
Right.
Yeah, I like when the parents are involved. It's tough when the kids are interested and the parents show no interest, especially if they're more, they're young, like preteens or younger, and they're so interested and they want to, and the parents don't even get close enough to the table to kind of interact. So, but the ones that are like really, they care about the child's interests and they're asking the questions. So, because it's the kid's gecko, but yeah, like you're saying, the parents, if they have to step in or want to, it's not going to be an issue because they know what they're talking about. So I can go ahead and direct them to a group, or, I have all my, the graphics that I have for simple basic care and feeders and whatever I can point out. There's other vendors that I can point them to get the supplies they need or the feeders that they need. And even if they don't buy a gecko for me, I'll certainly point out a few vendors that I would trust to send them over to if I don't have something, that they're specifically interested in or looking for, or, what have you. I have no problem with that. I just, it's just hard if, people come over and they're like, well, I can get the same gecko at Petco, or this guy has a bucket of them for 30 or 50 bucks a piece. And it's like, I may have a handful that are $50, $60, but obviously those typically go right away, but they're not, I've turned people down. So if I can see that, well, what's the cheapest one on your table, and they don't even look first, like,
Heidi doesn't play,
like,
guys.
No. I don't like that. I care about where my animals go, so even when people like message you and it's questionable where they're shipped to.
Sounds like a personal story.
Yeah, you gotta watch those.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you guys. One thing that I know a lot of people were wondering, for those people who are just getting in, like we mentioned, there's been an influx of new breeders that are, really passionate about geckos, but just are kind of confused because there's so much information. You have like some people over here that are, telling people to take their time and really get interested in, the geckos and everything. And you have other people who are kind of just like, buy, whatever morphs hot right now, or like, maybe buy like Enigmas or Lemon Frost. That's a thing that's going on right now. How would you guys recommend people, just really get on an ethical route to start getting into geckos and really producing nice stuff? If they're really passionate about it and really in for it, to just create an awesome project that they're really passionate about, instead of just get into it for, other reasons that someone might get into breeding geckos.
Well, I'll give the same advice I always give. Work with what you like visually, first of all. What catches your eye. That's the best advice I was given by the first person I bought any legit geckos from. And start small and grow slowly. Just like I say every single podcast. Because that's the best way to do it and not get yourself overwhelmed and in a bind. I mean, even doing it that way, you'll still have these moments every now and then where you're like, oh shit, that's a lot of geckos to take care of. And, it's just, it can be very overwhelming. And those that don't take that word of advice, 9 times out of 10, you don't see them for more than a couple of years, you'll see these guys getting in, and first or second year, they're talking about 30, 40 pairings, and some people can pull that off. Most cases, that's a little much, and it just depends on how much time you have dedicated to it too. If you're trying to work a full-time job and do that much, you're probably stuff's gonna fall through the cracks, and it's usually gonna be the animals that end up suffering, So, and that's the main reason that I'm so hard about, that I'm always making that advice, is because whenever stuff does start falling through the cracks and stuff does get overwhelming, that's what ends up happening, is the animals end up usually suffering, because people have a family to take care of, or they have a full-time job that they have to, they can't lose, and they need that money to take care of their family, and geckos are not the most important thing in their household, and that's understandable, but that's why it's up to you to make sure you don't outgrow your own ability and your own capacity, and don't work with lemon frost and Enigma. That's simple enough. I mean,
that's it. It's that easy. Just don't work with them. There's no secret recipe.
It's that simple. It's really that simple, Evan. No,
Wow.
it's really that simple. Like, I saw another great example of why that is a problem. Just 2 days ago, I saw on one of the Facebook pages, somebody posted, "Oh, our first babies just started breeding," and I actually ignorantly posted. I was like, "Man, one of those babies looks like a white and yellow. Maybe one of your parents, one of the parents is white and yellow." And then somebody corrected me. "Oh no, it's an Enigma." And I looked closer at the parents, and sure enough, the dad was a visual Enigma. And then people started kind of jumping on her, as most people in the groups usually do. And come to find out, she had bought the geckos from a pet store, had no clue that it was an Enigma, and so now she's got her very first season that she's trying to breed, which. Everybody starts somewhere. I have no quarrels. I literally started with Petco geckos 8 years ago. I bred them for 1 year, just to be clear, and sold everything as pets. But like, everybody starts from somewhere. So I don't have any quarrel about the fact that she bought it from a pet store, but the fact that the pet store was selling Enigmas to people unknowingly buying them is the problem. Now this woman, in her very first season of messing with geckos, is going to be hatching Enigmas all year. Or maybe that was her only clutch. I don't know, whatever. But in any case, now she's got to deal with not only the usual learning curve of how to take care of babies for her first time, but now she could very well have to deal with, additional neurological issues that obviously aren't fun to deal with. So anyway, just another great example of why they're just, the hobby could do without them.
There's just no reason for it. There's so many other healthy and beautiful morphs that there's no excuse. There's literally no fucking excuse to be working. And people ignore it because they, like, either the breeders have been around so long and because they sell other stuff or whatever it is, but it's still not cool. Like, I don't care how popular somebody is. The fact that they purposely are breeding animals that are doomed in one way or another, whether it's fatal tumors or they can't fucking hunt for themselves. Like, I don't care if it's only one out of every, one every year, 100 every year, or whatever. Like, that's too much as it is. Like, why? The only reason they ever give is that what it does, how they look. And that goes for Enigma and Lemon Frost. Like, Lemon Frost, in a sense, do look cool. They have amazing looking eyes and whatever, but it's not worth doing that. And Enigma, that's just a nightmare altogether. And there's no talking. It's like talking to a fucking wall with those.
You get this. You get the same response from them, whether it's Enigma or Lemon Frost that they're trying to promote. You get the same response from them. We see less instances each year, and they always point to white and yellow. You ever notice that? Every single time, they're going to claim that it's getting better and better, and they're going to bring up white and yellow as if white and yellow is an issue.
It's been taking 7, 8, 10 years, and you're seeing a slight improvement. But how many hundreds of fucking geckos then are you still sending out to do that? How many messages do we have to get, or posts we have to get that of these geckos like, oh, my breeder sent it, it was fine when they shipped it. Like,
and how many have they had to call to get to that point? I mean,
yeah,
just regular breeding. Just regular breeding brings its own problems and brings its own, difficulties and failure to thrive here and there. And you're going to have to cull one or two here and there without adding a problematic genetic in there. So it just baffles me that people even consider doing it. And it never fails. It's always the people that either just started or it's like their second year breeding that they decide they're going to work with Enigma. And it makes sense because they haven't been around long enough to hear enough seasoned people say, no, we've tried it, don't do it. But they want to have animals that look good. I mean, it makes sense, but it doesn't. It doesn't make sense to me. But I understand why it's always a certain or usually it's a certain genre of breeders that decide they're going to work with them.
Luckily, yeah, it is some of the newer breeders that come in and they have, it's typically Enigma. Not too many are working with Lemon Frost, at least publicly. There's only a handful. But Enigma, it'll be a newer breeder, and typically after their first season, like they'll say, oh, everything was fine, but by the next season, then they're facing the consequences if they stop working with it. But the people they got it from are just going to continue.
Yeah, you see them one season.
I don't know how they.
Yeah, you see them one season. Oh, I'm working with Enigma, and I got them from somebody that says that they're Enigma free or they barely ever see them. And then the very next season, you see them post, even though we love the morph, we're selling everything off as pets, and we're no longer working with them. It's not without cause.
It's just you can't say that happens. They're going to be ES free, because that's I don't think that something triggers it and it happens. It more often than not, when you see Enigma, it has the issue, and then that also brings up other issues where if you get a gecko that's not an Enigma and has some sort of neurological issues, and we have to explain it all over again. But luckily, I have most of the people in my group I'm pretty proud of, because they all have common sense. So if someone does ask about Enigma or Lemon Frost, we just had a Lemon Frost post like today or yesterday, and everyone gets on and they show them all the different documents, and they try to educate them. No one's ever rude, because I don't put up with that shit. If someone's gonna be rude, I say, well, Google it, and then we'll get out of my group. Like, you need to be a part of the community if you're gonna be there. So people learn quickly what those two morphs are and like problems with them. And I have no problem pointing out like which breeders to stay away from specifically for that. And we have a whole list of breeders that don't work with any of that crap. That
right. So there's like just when you're new and you're getting into it, you have these like two sides. Like there's people saying Lemon Frost and Enigma, there's nothing wrong with them, like they just need outcrossing. And then you have pretty much the more what we'd consider ethical breeders. So as a new person coming in and I'm hearing these two sides, what are some things that I should take into consideration when I'm like trying to figure out, okay, who's actually right, like who's on like the right side of the story when it comes to like these morphs, or just like crossing albino strains and getting more visual double albinos and things when it comes to that sort of thing?
I feel like it should be easier and easier these days. Whenever you first get in the scene or whatever, and you start looking at some of these bigger breeders and people that have it's pretty easy to tell who's got the nicer stuff whenever you really start looking through the groups. When you see pictures of John's stuff scrolling across, and pictures of Chris's, and whoever you're looking at on the pages, it's pretty easy to see who's been doing it for a while. And whenever the majority of those people, none of them are working with a certain morph, and that's going along with what you're hearing from the general community, to me it should be pretty commonsensical to just stay away from that stuff. But you're always going to get the outliers, and those people that think that they're going to change things, and they're going to do something that these bigger breeders that have so much more of a catalog to work with somehow didn't figure out, after a decade of working with said gene, so that's, to me it should be pretty simple. Whenever you see the majority of people staying away from things, but apparently it's not cut and dry.
Yeah,
I think it is, but
It is. They're like Seth said, it's easy to find out with Facebook and Instagram and God knows what else. Like, you can just look up anything you want. You can go join any group, see breeders' posts, scroll through their page, do your own research. Obviously, you can definitely ask their specific pages for that, for good and bad breeders, and people can share their experiences. And sometimes it's justified, sometimes not. But just asking, do your own research. Like, somebody might have a bunch of nice geckos, but if you see something questionable, there's a reason, and then back off. Like, you can't be like, well, this guy breeds all these beautiful geckos, but then he also has Enigma. So, but as long as I don't buy the Enigma, it should be fine. Like, no, you're still supporting that breeder. So, we kind of try to, in my group anyway, we say like, you know, we don't want breeders that are working with genetics like that to be promoted and advertised, because it's not fair to those animals. They're still going to be produced because we make sales on them. So if we kind of cut, and not that even just my group is all that math, but if that little bit of knowledge can spread into the other groups, then eventually maybe they'll stop. That's the hope, but you know.
Yeah.
People breeding, they're not.
I also want to point out, we're talking about a couple of specific genetics, but there's also certain lines that you need to be careful of too, you know, and need to not avoid, but make sure you're buying from the right people if you're going to work with certain lines, like Black Knight, we mentioned earlier. You know, a lot of people have had some trouble with fertility and size and all kind of issues on some of the females on Black Knights. So that's something that if I was going to get into, I wouldn't just rush out and buy from the first person I saw on Morph Market with Black Knights without doing some research into.
90% of the people trying to sell Black Knights don't have them. So
good point. Yeah, good point. Most of those don't even exist. That has got to be the most scammed morph. Yeah, it's insane. I saw Doomrul's boas starting to get a lot of scams now too, because they got a high demand right now.
No matter what group people are in, I make posts constantly. If somebody's like, I have these Black Knights, I need to bring home, good price, blah blah. It's like nobody asked about that. Who the fuck are you? Like, it's like, you know, red flags. You get people that, you know, they post in other groups that, oh, I was scammed. It's like, well, it sucks. Some people aren't as aware, but it's like, it's red flag. Like, you didn't even ask about that. They're harassing you with messages trying to sell. Like, you know, you got to be careful. So people that are looking for Black Knights, like, there are a handful of breeders that actually have them. So you really got to be careful, and you got to go into a breeder group and actually ask about that, because there's all these like Leopard Gecko groups with like 400 people in them. Nobody knows who has what. None of them are really breeders. So you get, you know, 10 people. It's one person, 10 profiles, just selling Black Knights to everybody. But yeah, like what Seth was saying, I've heard a lot about infertility and them being smaller. Or eyelid.
I would just definitely research who I was getting from if I was going to mess with that. Like, to be clear, I think they're awesome looking animals. I would, you know, I'll probably end up adding them to my collection one of these days, but it won't be tomorrow. And when and if I do, like I said, I won't just be grabbing one from the first person that I see that has them, you know, whether they exist or not, up for sale.
Right. I think it's so much cooler just when you go into, if more people came into breeding with the mindset of just getting the coolest animal that they could get. Like, if I'm looking for like the coolest bulls, like obviously you guys are the people to go to, but like, I think it really shouldn't even matter on like, you know, trying to find the cheapest animal you could find, or like the most popular breeder or whatever, but whoever has like the coolest animals and like visually who has like the most passion for whatever project that they're working in, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that you really want to look for when it comes to like those really good ethical breeders who are really passionate about, you know, the projects that they're working with.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of us. There's a bunch of really good breeders out there right now, and it comes down to what you like. You know, like whether it's breeding or just getting a pet. Like finding, you know, when you're strolling around, you find something that like you love what you're seeing, so you look more into it, find out what it is, who's working with it, then you kind of venture from there to see who else is working with them and kind of pick that way. I mean, there's a lot of breeders working with stuff that I don't personally work with or wouldn't, but I really admire the work they put into them, and they're gorgeous animals. It's just not, you know, like for me specifically, I only work with the Tremper line. Seth has some bells that are pretty damn hot. So maybe in a few more.
You're gonna have bells soon enough. I'm gonna just send you a bell next year. Like, I'm not even gonna message you. You're just gonna get it in the mail, and then you'll have to work with them.
They're really nice, and I have a friend breeding like gold stripe rainwaters right now that are really nice. But I'm not really that interested. But as far as having them myself, but they are really cool. So,
well, I remember us having the same conversation about Jim Snow about 4 years ago, Heidi, and you were like, "Yeah, I already have Max Snow. I'm not gonna work with Jims." And here we are.
I've been Max Snows now.
I know.
Well, we got a lot. I got a lot. Long way to go with that. I got a lot more things in mind for that, but I'm not getting a bell.
I've been keeping a bunch of gems in hiding this year. I've got all kind of stuff over here that's looking incredible that I'm just like, I haven't even taken pictures of, like, because they're not going anywhere, so I'm not even worried about taking pictures of them. So I'll show them off. I'll show them off next year whenever I'm producing the next generation of them.
I'm nervous. I already know. The stuff I've seen is just like insane, so I'm scared to see what this next generation's looking like. I might.
Only gets better.
Oh, man.
Only gets better.
Seth is really gonna have me going over to Texas and hand picking stuff out of his collection. Man,
y'all need to come down for the next big NARBC. Y'all need a carpool.
Next one's March, right? Next March.
February.
We'll be snowed in. We can't come.
Yeah, you're right. You will be snowed in.
I might come before the snow starts and then
February 12th.
Just have nice weather all year round.
Hang out all winter. Yeah, spend winter in Texas.
Evan's gonna move. One winter and he's gonna move.
I heard last winter wasn't even that bad, and now they're saying this winter is gonna be worse, and I'm like, ugh. I'm not.
It's always the same.
Well, we had some crazy winter last year.
Oh yeah.
This past February, we had a crazy winter storm that was very out of the ordinary for this area. Yeah, I was stressed out for like a week straight. Running my incubators on a generator and just up all night, stressed out. Every time I hear the thermostat alarms kick off, I was basket case.
But still, even despite that, you still had, a lot of great. You were prepared and had a lot of great stuff hatch out. Last
I was
season.
lucky. I'll be very clear. I was very fortunate. I was able to scoop up a generator last minute right before that storm hit, and had just enough fuel to run it for the whole week. And I lucked out. They had a lot of other people in my area that weren't nearly as lucky. I was definitely thankful.
Heidi, do you have any backup generators? Or
I'll be more prepared this winter. That's for sure.
Of course I do.
Well, y'all are on gas heat too up there, right?
What's that?
Well, I'm assuming that y'all are on natural gas for your heat?
Propane, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we got a generator the first year because I live in the woods by the lake, so if it's too windy, a branch falls somewhere and we lose power. So the longest luckily it was like the end of my season, so I only had a few eggs left that were almost due, which some of them had to early, but we lost power for like 4 days.
Wow.
So we had our generator running. So that sucks. But otherwise now it's only a couple hours if that happens.
You got battery backups
So I can't be
for your incubators, huh?
running all year long.
You run battery backups on your incubators, huh, Heidi?
Yeah, I got that.
That's an important point we should talk about, Evan. I mean, not to jump around too much, but I just thought about it. I think that not a lot of people run any kind of backup battery on their incubators, and that's a big lifesaver. Just like you would run a computer on, just a battery backup UPS system. And just like everything else, you get what you pay for.
Right.
The nicer one you get, the bigger capacity it's going to have, the longer it's going to run for you, and the more durable it's going to be. I
was only $60.
Yeah, they have they go all the way from $40 or $50 all the way up to probably $300 or more. I'm sure they have some $1,000 ones that are just crazy.
I can plug them all into it.
But yeah, I can get about 8 or 9 hours, no issues at all, running my incubators on that battery backup, because that's all I have running on it is the incubators. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point to put up. I think just being prepared in general while we're talking about, people getting into Leos and just, having a backup for their stuff and everything. I know a lot of people in Texas, had, unfortunate seasons because of that and pretty much lost everything. But it's a lot of things that, sometimes it just slips your head when you're thinking about breeding. It's like, you have your racks and incubators and everything, but just in case something happens, you never know, and you just want to be as prepared as possible.
Yep. So. Yep. A generator is one thing. That's a little bit bigger investment, but battery backup something small and fairly, cost effective that could save you, because it doesn't have to be a major event for your incubators to fail on you. And just a few hours of no power, and you could be in a bind. Depending on how well
and they're super easy to charge up too. Just keep them charged and
you keep it plugged into the wall all the time, and whenever the way I run mine, I don't know how y'all do yours, but I just have my incubators plugged into the battery backup as the surge protector, so they're on it 24/7. So immediately, if my house loses power, the incubators never even miss a beat. They're automatically on that battery backup. It just switches over instantly.
Really?
So,
okay. I should actually try that. Yeah, that's smart.
It's just a computer, regular computer UPS system that you can get at Best Buy or Amazon or whatever. And it has two sides to it. One side is surge protection only, and then the other side is surge protection and battery backup. And so all of my thermostats and other stuff is on the surge protection only side, but then my thermostats for my incubators and my incubator fans are on the battery backup and surge protection side. So whenever I lose power, the surge protection only side, that's not getting any power at all. But everything that's plugged into the battery backup side, which is only my incubators, that way it's conserving battery when it's using battery, they automatically kick over to the battery. So there's no, like I said, they don't miss a beat.
Nice.
And you don't
Heidi,
have to,
do you have kind of a similar
anything.
setup too?
Yeah. I just have the incubators plugged into it. I don't have my rack plugged into it because my gecko room is in my lower level, but in the hill, so the overall room maintains like good ambient temperature. So if the racks lose power, it doesn't get cold in there. So I mainly just worry about the incubator. If we're going to lose power for more than a day, then just run the generators, and I plug in, that, and it's all my racks and my fridge. All that gets plugged in.
Yeah, and I think it's also like really important to. I think leopard geckos in general are pretty. I think obviously with eggs, that's a different story. But if you have like just racks of adult leopard geckos and it's nice weather or decent temperature, the room's even room temperature, like they could last a couple days if they really had to.
Weeks.
And that
they're very
yeah.
It's just the eggs I worry about are anything that's like really young. Other than that, I don't really worry about. Another thing I think that people, if they're breeding, is I'm obsessed, but checking in on your incubators a couple times a day is important, because you may not notice then for a few days that your temps are out of whack, and then something doesn't hatch or hatches out all wonky and you don't really know why, and then they'll go and check the incubator temp and say, oh shit, it's 4 or 5 degrees off, or whatever. So I always make sure that when I have things hatching, I check like every hour. But otherwise, check in morning and night or what have you.
Yeah.
Just to make sure the temps are where they need to be. And I also put like 2 or 3 thermometers in. I have one with probes in like a dummy cup, and then I have one on top of a cup, and then I have one like on the floor, just so I can get a really good like overall reading of what my temps are, so it's not too low, because people want females that incubate like right at 82 or whatever, but it's actually probably much lower than what they have it set for. So then they're not hatching anything for like 70 days.
Right. I know, Seth, don't you make your own incubators, right?
Yeah. Okay. I pick up like used wine coolers on like the OfferUp app or on Facebook Marketplace. I keep an eye out in my area for anybody selling used wine coolers that are broken or not, whether they work or not. And if they let them go for cheap, I'll scoop them up. I've got like 3 in my garage right now. I'm working on building. I'll build them and bring them to the expo. If I don't want to keep it to use, I'll bring it to the expos and sell it. People usually scoop them up. But yeah, I like the wine coolers because they've got the glass front, so you can check your eggs a million times a day, like Heidi likes to, without having to open anything.
Check and look in the window. I don't open it.
And then
don't open it.
And I feel like they have superior insulation over most other boxes that you could use.
Yeah,
I like the wine coolers for sure.
Cool.
And they look nice too.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's nice glass front. Shells already, there and everything. So that's awesome. And Heidi, what do you use for incubation?
Most of them are just like styrofoam chicken incubators from like Menards or Tractor Supply.
How many do you have, Heidi? Why don't you just break down and build a big one?
I like having them spread out.
How many do you have, really?
6.
I have 8, and I have no
season.
reason to have 8 of them.
Just like 6. I have more, but those ones I actually use for so I don't.
Oh, okay.
You know, those
Gotcha.
ones stay upstairs. I hatch chicken eggs in my bathroom upstairs. I think it's all on the counter.
If you need some more, I have some for you.
Probably. My first incubator that I ever got was like a reprobator, and it still works. I know a lot of people hate them, but I have had no issues with it. So that's the first one I fill up every year, because I typically do 1 or 2 of them that are hopefully temp-sex female. Usually they turn out that way. And then I have temp-sex male, and then I have a couple that are just at random. They're right at like 6, 7. So, which is probably why I get mostly males every year. But
I got a bunch of males out of my temp sex females this year because I cranked it up to like 84ish for my. I did it that temp for my fat tails, and as a result, I've got a lot of temp sex female Leos that ended up male. So I'm a little male heavy this year for sure because I didn't factor that in.
82, 83, but
Oh
Yeah,
another
females.
note on
I
the
just go.
incubators.
I pretty much go 81 for females, but they
Don't do
they
fat tails
take
at that temp though. If you ever get into fat tails, don't do them that low because you'll have a lot of failure. That's what I was trying to when I started. What's that, Heidi?
I usually just put the fat tails in the 86, and I have what I have.
Right.
I don't try to temp-sex that.
Another note on the incubators, Evan. As with everything else, don't skimp on the thermostats. That's the most critical part of that system is that thermostat. So and a lot of people, even if they use like the Hoverbators like y'all are talking about, that have their own little dial thermostat, a lot of people will piggyback another thermostat on it, so that you've got actually they'll turn that dial thermostat way up to where it's wide open, and they'll use a nicer thermostat to control the heating element, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think definitely thermostats is one thing you don't want to cheap out on when it comes to geckos. Along with, there's a few things you could talk about, supplementation, those sorts of things that you don't want to cheap out on when it comes to geckos, especially when you're breeding. It's, totally different story. So, yeah, I think, when it comes to just those things with breeding, I think a lot of people get a lot of confusion just because there's so many ways to do things. But I think we kind of talked about this on our last episode. There's just so many ways to do things. But it really just comes down to experimentation, but then also just, connecting with breeders. I think that's one thing that I think more people are getting more used to is just, reaching out to breeders and, fully, even like when they're getting a new gecko and they're not really sure what to get, they're really connecting to those breeders and, seeing, what they deal with, how they deal with things. Have you guys seen that with your customers, with just, them being really interested in the personal care of the geckos and, everything that goes along with that kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely.
You too, Seth?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's really just a really important thing to really just get to know the breeder. You guys have probably got those messages where they just send the picture of the gecko and they just say how much, and it's you don't even want to respond to that because it's if that's that's all you care about, the gecko, then how are you gonna go and care about this gecko after I send it to you? So
yeah, it goes both ways though, because some people just aren't really that personable though. Some people just don't really want to socialize or have issues with socializing for whatever reason, and some of those people are some of the ones that end up being really good caretakers and and breeders or breeders. So you definitely gotta take the good with the bad and kind of go with the flow there. But yeah, I know what you mean. There's definitely those that are kind of sketchy right out the gate. No.
Right. What do you guys think are some good things to just catch up on as a breeder? Like say if you're a newer breeder and you're on Morph Market and you're listing your animals and people are inquiring about these animals, what are some things to look out for just from a breeder standpoint? Just making sure your geckos go to good homes and they're getting good care and they're going to go to good homes that people are going to care for.
Questions. I personally I don't like 101 questions, but I like when people ask, like, what, how are they, what's the feeding schedule? What are you feeding? What kind of supplements are you actually using? Because they maybe want to mimic that. A lot of people, I let them know, with being a breeder, I do use racks, but I'll go over, set of options as far as what they're comfortable with or what they had in mind. Supplements is very important. And then again, depending on your setup is what kind of supplements you're going to need. There's a ton of misinformation on that as well. And then I get otherwise I'll get that too. It's not someone wanting to inquire about a gecko, but they got a gecko and its legs, make a C shape or, and they don't know why or what they do. It's like, supplements, so I will know, okay, so I'm like, well, you need to get it some supplements, and then sometimes they'll say, well, I just got this, last week, like this, so what do I do? Well, it was neglected, obviously. This is what you can do to try to rehab it a little bit, and it'll definitely strengthen up a little bit. It's not reversible or anything, but I've seen some of them. We have some rescue, people that have rescue cages in our group that they'll have, one of the worst conditions ever, and, 6 months later, they're brand new gecko. So people that put in the work and the care to actually rehab is, something that we've seen a lot of that I appreciate. Some people, they go to Petco and they buy it. Oh, I rescued this. There's nothing wrong with it. You just got it from Petco. So I know some people that kind of rubs them the wrong way, is the word, and then especially in a group where we do have a lot of people that rescue from the worst situations ever. But I mean, textbook rescue is taking it out of a bad situation. I guess there's a bad situation, but it's one of those things. But yeah, supplements is definitely important. So that's a lot that I touch on when I'm selling anything. It's making sure it's prepared. I've even shipped some, and some people, if their significant other opens it and they have no idea what the little bag is, I write that it's calcium or whatever.
It's not drugs.
But one of those things, well, this is what I'm using now, so until your order comes in or whatever.
I never thought about doing that with geckos I shipped. I actually give away calcium supplements at the expos with geckos, but I never thought about throwing some in there with the shipped ones.
Teeny cups. I was doing those teeny little feeder cups with some dubia too for a while. I was sending those along. So they get this way they can visually see what size to order, because some people get overwhelmed. They're ready to purchase what they need to, but they're oh my god, so there's it'll have all the different the increments, and they're well, which one? And I'm I'll just send you some and you can see for yourself, so then you know what to get. Or I'll get the little measuring tape and hold the bug on there. Well, this is what she's eating now.
Nice.
So, but yeah, I just sent little cups home with bugs, through shipping, or even at the expo. I was doing it for a while, but then it just was I need to.
It's a lot. It's a lot of extra to pack up bugs when you're getting ready for an expo too.
It is. It definitely.
I found that to be a little extra hassle.
Well, then because I'm trying to put a dozen or 2 dozen in each little cup for people, depending on what it was, and it's just a lot to remember to do. So, and then with bugs being so so out of stock and overpriced right now, I need my colonies. So I still give the locals who buy from me, I'll still give them some feeders, but I don't.
Seth wouldn't know. He just breeds all his own feeders. So.
Anymore.
I don't know what bugs cost anymore.
I just don't mess with worms. I haven't fed mealworms in a couple of years. I order crickets on occasion and super worms a few times a year, but I breed red runner roaches, roaches, so I have colonies of those. Are the main staples.
Yeah, I think just feeding and supplementation is, something that people still are just really confused on, especially because there's so many different variations and setups nowadays. If you're, getting into breeding, a lot of people like what you're gonna supplement in a rack is not gonna be the same as how you're gonna supplement in like, a nice enclosure with UVB. If someone wants to do that and go a little bit more naturalistic. So yeah, it's just really important that I think I'd recommend for more people to get into that. And I know Heidi, you might know a little bit more about this, just from, the Facebook group and everything, but how have you seen, people navigate that? Just, what is the best feeder for them and getting into supplementation and how to, really nail that down so their gecko's able to get, best of both worlds and really be, healthy.
So for feeders, for the most part, as long as it's legal, majority are recommending Duvia as the best. As superworms are becoming more popular. Crickets are coming back. I know for a while they were considered the dirty feeder, but we have so many posts talking about just proper gut loading and keeping their enclosures clean. So then you're not, their crickets are just as healthy or healthier than some, like mealworms are kind of like a garbage feeder, I think. So we don't really, it's kind of the last resort because you can get those over anything else. And then for supplements, it depends on the setup also. So if they want to have UVB, they can have calcium without D3. And then if they don't, they need the D3. And then if they want to do a dusting schedule or if they want to put it in a dish so they can self-regulate, which is what I recommend the most, just because they'll take what they need. The overdosing issue comes up where there's like no cases of that. Overdosing comes from constant overdosing and force feeding, I believe. I've been letting mine self-regulate for like 6 years, and I have no MBD issues and none of them. I don't really see any type of vitamin deficiencies attached to these people as far as like, I have one geckos with stubby tails, but
you're not dusting, Heidi. You're just gut loading and keeping it in the cages.
Yeah.
Okay.
So are you saying you have a separate dish for your supplements, or? Yeah.
They each have a little teeny like clear dish for the supplements, and then they either go palm feed sometimes, or I drop it into the ponds. When they're smaller, I'll sometimes drop the roach into the supplements, and it'll fall off. It'll have a little bit on there, but I'll catch them eating the supplements. You can tell if they walk through it, or if I'm refilling it every whatever. I'll just put like a quarter teaspoon in a tiny dish for them every week.
Got it.
I also do the liquid calcium. I'll put some drops of that in a water bottle, and I'll soak down, like grabbing females, I'll soak down their hides with that.
Got it. And what are you using for supplementation?
4 years ago, and I haven't had to deal with something like that ever since. So it's kind of what I wanted to try.
Okay. What are you using for supplementation, Heidi?
Osteoform SA and Bionate, or the reptile, herpetoculture, and the calcium with D3. Pangea just has, I know they have the calcium plus, or no, that's a patch. Pangea has a calcium plus vitamins that I just got, that I'm gonna try that. Probably the start of this season on a few and see how it goes. Just because that, you can get a pack of that plus herpetoculture, I think it was, calcium and then herpetoculture. I think it was like $13 on Pangea. So, because sometimes when you go to order on like Amazon or whatever, Bionate or Osteoform's like out of stock everywhere earlier this year. So I kind of look at options for that. So that's usually what I recommend. Otherwise, people and whatever else.
Seth, are you using a similar regimen as Heidi, or you do things a little different?
No, totally different actually. I use Reptile brand supplements. I've used those forever, since well before I bred. I just buy them in bulk now. And as y'all know, I gut load religiously, and I also dust very heavily and keep it in their cage. And I've never had a D3 overdose, so I'm pretty sure that's a myth at this point.
Like I said, it's like forced on them. I don't think.
Yeah. But no, I've been using Reptile for forever, and so I've never had any real big issues. So I'm just kind of sticking with that. I know it's probably a little bit more expensive to go that route, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's kind of where I'm at with it, which I think is how a lot of people end up. They learn a certain way and they start with that way, and then like Heidi and I are a perfect example. We've both been doing it for 6-7 years, and we've both been doing it our own way for all that time, and I'm not going to convince her to use Repcal, and she's not going to convince me to use Osteoform SA. It's just it's not a necessary change, in either case. So I think that's a good example of there being several different ways to skin a cat, as they say.
Skin a gecko.
Yeah, skin a
Don't
gecko.
do that, guys. Seth, for your ratio, do you use 2-to-1 or?
As far as dusting,
Yeah.
with my fat tails, I actually go about 1-to-1.
Okay.
And the Leos probably a little more like 2-to-1. The Leos, they just basically, I don't really add any multivitamin when I'm feeding Leos because there's enough trace multivitamins in my duster cups from the fat tail racks that I don't really have to add any extra. They do. The female Leos do get some multivitamin in their calcium dish during the season. But other than that, that's about it. Like I said, we use so much of the multivitamin. Fat tails require a little bit more multivitamin than Leos, and so we use it pretty heavily whenever we're doing a fat tail rack. So there's always some trace multivitamin in that cup.
Cool. Now, I know a lot of people, I don't know if you guys have seen this this past year, but I know a lot of people were just having questions about feeder dishes and like what people use for feeder dishes, and is it necessary depending on what you're feeding to use feeder dishes, and then also for hatchlings, like getting started, what's the best feeder dish to use for hatchlings? So what do you guys use for those two things?
So when we're starting a new baby off, we actually use the Lee. We have several different dishes we use. We start them off with the Lee's, the little brown Lee's mealworm dishes. They look like a piece of wood. Basically, they have like wood grain on them, and it's two pieces. It's a little rim that snaps on a base. And so whenever we start a brand new hatchling, first we leave it with just an empty tub with the hide for the first couple of days, and then once they have their first stool, the first shed and stool, then we add in just the base of that dish with a couple of tiny dubia in it. And the idea behind that is that the Leo or fat tail can get in and out of that dish very easily. And it fairly contains those tiny dubia, but a few of them usually get out of it. So for those first couple of meals, they have a pretty large abundance of the bugs all around the cage, but there's not much else in the cage. And then once they eat their first meal or two, then we add the rim on top of it to contain the bugs a little bit more, because at that point we know that the gecko has enough energy. It's got a couple meals in it, so it has enough energy to get in and out of the bowl easily. And then once they move out of the 6-quart tubs, we actually go to the little white escape-proof dishes with the clear lid, or rim rather. And so that's what we run in all of our adult tubs, is the larger white one. So that's the two dishes that we use. That seems to work out pretty well.
Yeah.
And then
That's cool.
the cricket eaters obviously get just crickets loose in their tub. But
right. Now
we need to
now
go
that
to
I have
cricket
you
trick
on
too.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
Yeah, I actually
Go ahead
kind
and
of
have that spiel right now.
Yeah, I just kind of started doing something different in my collection this year, that is kind of a game changer for me as far as feeding crickets goes. I've always hated feeding crickets just like everybody else, and the dead ones stink. Crickets don't stink, dead crickets stink. That's what I always tell people at the expos whenever we start talking about crickets. And that's the truth. I breed crickets. I have millions of crickets probably in my garage, and it doesn't smell like crickets at all, because as soon as a batch starts dying, I feed them off. But anyway, one thing I started doing differently in my collection is rather than typical, or the way I always did things with my reptiles ever since I first started keeping reptiles, is I would clean a cage, change the water, and then feed it. And then, come back the next couple days or week or whatever and do it again. Well, what I started doing differently with the crickets is I feed a given rack. I feed the whole rack, each tub gets X number of crickets, 6 to 12 crickets depending. And then I give them an hour or so, and then I come back and I clean and change the water on all those racks. And the idea behind it is I'm able to, there's several different factors that make it beneficial. I'm able to not overfeed, but make sure that each gecko gets its fill by feeding more than enough crickets. And then I can pull the extras. I don't have crickets dying in water bowls because at that point the water is down to just, less than an inch or so because it's due to be changed anyway. And I don't have as much crickets laying eggs in the humid hides because they're only spending an hour or so in there. And I'm not opening a tub that's stinking full of dead crickets from crickets that didn't get ate from the week before. So it's just definitely been a big game changer for me on that front as far as feeding the crickets goes. And then the crickets I pull out, if it's my general population is it's a pretty close collection at this point. So the crickets that I pull out do go back into the cricket tub for further, future feedings. If it's from the quarantine rack, that stuff goes straight to the turtles outside. If I have any leftovers, they're my garbage disposals. But that's pretty much it on that. It's a simple thing that I changed up, just the order of operations for that is making a big difference for me as far as overall cleanliness and ease of using crickets.
Seth, do you have a picture of your cricket setup on your page?
I don't, but I can definitely do that. I actually need to do a little video on all the different feeder stuff because I get people asking about it all the time. It'd be easier just to have something to send them to.
It took how many months until we got the mealworm one? I'm messing with you.
We did a cricket.
Yeah, no. Well, I have a cricket. I have a video on YouTube that's just how to set up my cricket starter kit that I was selling. Because sometimes at the expos I'll do it if somebody. I don't do them anymore unless somebody requests it. But I'll have the whole life stage cricket kit with all the different containers, and it's got eggs that are like a week old and babies that just hatched, and smalls, mediums, and larges, and it's basically a plug and play system that you just have to set up. So that's what that video is it's just me explaining how to set up that system that I sell. But I need to do a more inclusive video on just my system overall, on my breeding setup. Because it's definitely a big lifesaver. Because the way I breed them, you can scale it up or down to whatever your capacity or needs are. So even if you only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 geckos, you can do it easily on, like I said, any level that you need to, and just adjust there's ways to tweak it and adjust your production and adjust the growth rate very easily.
Sweet. Heidi, what do you use for feeding dishes? Do you use the same one for each size, or?
Yeah. Well, no. I have little ceramic dishes that I use, or I use the little melamine ones because the roaches can't climb out of that, but they're still shallow enough that babies can get in there. But for the most part, I kind of just drop a couple in, 1 or 2 at a time, so I can just watch them feed. Or I do spend a lot of time tongue feeding just to kind of get their trust. It's part of the socializing I try to do with most of the babies, at least. And I have a few adults that they'll look at the bug that falls in and then look back up at me. So, like, I try to let them hunt and tongue feed a little bit, but otherwise I just put them in like a little ceramic dish. Depending on the size of the gecko, I'll go up a size. I don't know exactly what they're called, but they're the little like terracotta dishes that little pots go in. I'll use those too because those clean up really easily. And sometimes I'll put the supplements in there, and then I'll just drop the feeders on top of that.
You should charge a $60 socializing fee.
People like to say that they want something friendly, so I can be like, well, yes, actually.
I've gotten some geckos in the past that are just, to this day, hate me.
I still get those. I have some that I've had for a couple of years, and they still hate to be touched, but some of them are just really cool about it. I handle them every few days.
I've got one of my craziest ones is a gem bold that I hatched. That he's been nuts since a baby. He just never wanted to be touched.
It's crazy.
And
gems aren't. I wouldn't think a gem would be.
No. I mean, it's not a specific thing to them. It just happens to be that gecko. But it's just he's probably one of my craziest ones. And like if you walk in the room and he's out of his hide, he'll fly into his hide right away. And whenever you clean him, like he wants nothing to do with anybody, ever. He's not mean.
Wow.
He won't bite you or anything. But like he would much rather not be touched ever in his life.
That's crazy. I know the blizzards and stuff get, those are pretty nuts.
Yeah.
Heidi, you still got Diablo Blancos going on?
No.
Okay. I
No,
wonder why.
I haven't. I bred those for 2 or 3 years, and then every one of them would have an attitude, and I just was over it.
See, I found that really interesting because my first group of geckos that I started with, like I said earlier, was some Petco geckos, and a pair of them were het blizzard. I would hatch blizzards out of that stuff, and I never had any of those blizzards that were wild in any way.
I think
it's a line thing.
If it's the Diablo, because I know a lot of people were comparing notes on that.
Oh,
And
the
it just
albino
seems weird.
blizzards seem to be a little crazier.
Yeah,
Well, that would make sense though if they're more light sensitive.
because I had a blazing blizzard that she was really chill. But otherwise, her babies, because I bred her to a Diablo, and most of their babies had Eclipse. So whenever I would hatch Diablos out, they were really thick. Like all babies kind of scream, but these ones wouldn't stop, and they would jump and lunge at you.
Really, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So I just was like, okay. They were hard to sell too, at least in the expos, because when people would go to pick up the cup, they would freak out.
Mm.
So I sold off my last group. They did go locally, but the guy was aware of their temperaments, but he just thought they were really cool looking. So
I'm gonna have to poke.
yeah,
I'm gonna have to
I stopped.
pick my buddy's brain. I got a local friend that he still works with them. I'm gonna pick his brain a little bit and see how his group is as far as temperament.
Yeah. Well, like a lot of people that work with raptors say they're one of the chillest morphs.
Oh yeah,
I've
raptors
always
are.
had nice ones.
I've never had a
always-
crazy raptor before.
I've never found any difference in like specific morphs. I see differences in individual geckos, but other than light sensitivity and stuff like that, I've never found any specific attitude differences. But I've never, like I said, I just worked with that one pair that produced blizzards years ago. But obviously, there's a thing with the blizzards because there's too many people that have vouched for it. That it's definitely a thing.
Yeah. Well, I find people say about the raptors with them being cool. I breed I usually produce a few raptors every year, and they all have the same attitudes. They're all like pretty easygoing. They handle so easy. They're personable. They come out when you're in the room. And then anything else, the eclipses or bolt stripes, it's, some are cool, some are, I mean, they're all cool, but some of them are not tolerant.
Yeah. And I think one thing I noticed even with like the bells this year, I think Seth and I had a conversation about this, but the light sensitivity of the bell albinos more than any of the other albino strains.
So I
Not
got
that there's anything.
I got a really.
I know you told me. Yeah, go ahead, Seth.
I got a really interesting call from somebody earlier this year, or message from somebody, and he got me on the phone, and apparently he's a newer breeder, and he's a snake breeder, he's a ball python breeder, and he told me this story about he built this nice incubator, and it's got LED lights on the inside of the door, like facing into the incubator, and he clicks it on every day when he gets to his facility. And he's hatching bells out of that incubator that are not light sensitive at all. Like almost like the light while they're in incubation, the light exposure is desensitizing their retinas in some kind of way. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, it makes sense, but it's it's kind of off, out there. But like he showed me pictures and videos of these. Like when he first sent it to me, I was like, "That's not bells," because like they're like, just bright-eyed in a bright room, just looking around. I was like, "There's no way that's bells." And he's like, "No, for real." And he told me the lineage and everything, and they trace out to legit sources as far as the strain of albino. So that's pretty interesting to me. That there could be some kind of way to reduce the light sensitivity, which would be cool if it's actually a thing, I actually need to reach out to him and see what else he found, because that was much earlier in the season. I'm sure he hatched a lot more since then. I need to reach out to him and see what's going on.
Yeah. How are you going to get some bells and try it out for yourself?
No.
Heidi will have bells next year, I promise. Like I said, I'm just gonna send it.
No,
one.
I have enough going on. I have a lot more gems. I had I think 2 gem pairings this year, which most are staying, obviously. But I have 2 or 3.
I'm gonna send you a pair.
Yeah, I just started getting into bells, and they're just so much color-wise. They just, and especially wine yellow bell stuff. They're crazy.
I would literally have nothing to pair.
I'm gonna send you a pair. I'm gonna send you a pair of gem bold
I don't need
het bells, and one of them will be white and yellow.
Oh.
And you won't be able to turn me down. You'll have to work with them.
I don't work with white and yellow either.
Jim Bold Bell white and yellow though. That sounds crazy.
We'll see.
I feel like that would
I don't
be
know.
bold.
I just threw that out there. I mean, I've got the ingredients for it. It might
I like
end
the
up
sound of
something,
that.
but
The super hyper.
I've actually got a couple of really cool. I've got one Max Snow het bell that I hatched this year that's insane looking. It's the lightest Max Snow I've ever seen in my life. It's cool looking. So I'm interested to see. And that was a bowl cross. That was part of the testing out of my original pure hiss male or whatever. So yeah, that's gonna be cool to work with.
Yeah, that's awesome. Nice. Well, you guys, we covered a lot of stuff, and definitely super excited to finally get this episode that we had, because it's probably going to be another year and a half for the next one, Seth.
No, we gotta do this. We gotta do this more often. For
Yeah,
sure.
if he keeps.
We gotta do this more often.
Yeah. Was that all the topics?
I don't know. You said 9. I don't know if you still had more time. We could still. I had a few more things that we could. You got time?
Yeah. Well, it started like a half hour late because of Seth, and then now I have my phone charging, so that's why it's all wonky now, because I have.
Yeah, and I saw you struggling over there with your camera.
No, Seth has been talking, so no one's looking at me anyway.
What happened to the bowl of lemons?
The bowl of lemons don't charge it.
My charger won't be the lemon. So now I have to hold it. I don't have a long enough charger.
Man. I have a few more things if you still have time. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just open this list. Cool.
At least you're ordering.
Yeah,
right.
I had my list ready. Wanted to talk about social media right quick when it comes to finding ethical breeders on social media. I think that's another thing that has been as social media continues to get bigger in the hobby, and that's kind of the main way of finding breeders right now. I think it's really easy to just go on there and see, who's what from who, but just some more red flags when you're looking on social media specifically. And you don't really know that much about breeders, how you could really get to know a breeder just from social media and page and their presence on social media. Because I think you guys have seen, especially this year where a lot of people seem to have a lot of followers, people are, really digging their stuff, but may not be the best breeder, or vice versa. You might have a really good breeder that's really ethical, but doesn't have as many followers as, the ones that are hyped up. So how do you recommend people go along with that in finding good breeders that way?
Well, ask around for starters. There's plenty of FBI groups, gecko group, leopard gecko groups like Heidi's. If you ask in Heidi's group, hey, is there a breeder, for this kind of morph or whatever, somebody's gonna be able to steer you in the right direction. So asking around is one thing. Once you find a potential breeder, dig a little bit, creep their page a little bit. Every business page shows the date it was created. See how long that breeder's page has been created. If they just created it last year, that's not a red flag, because it might just be a newer breeder. But we were just talking about how there's lots of newer breeders that are on the right track, that have done the right homework, that have bought the right animals, and that are doing the right things. But that is at least cause for a little bit closer inspection. If their page was created in 2013 or 2014 and they've been around for that long, and they don't have all kind of bad, that was the next thing I was going to say is most pages you can go and read reviews. If they've got 50 reviews or 100 reviews and a 5-star rating, you're probably okay. You know what I mean? Like that's a pretty good gauge for somebody's success or how they're doing business. If they've been ripping a bunch of people off, there's going to be at least a couple of bad reviews in there. But if they're shining golden right there, then you're probably in pretty good shape. So that's a couple of easy ways to kind of vet somebody.
Heidi, what have you seen work in the past, or just from what you've seen?
Typically in the group, people will just ask. They'll either be looking for something specific as far as morphs or genetics, or they might have a breeder in mind and they'll straight up ask about it, which is nice because then we can, we can kind of give our opinion based on other experiences members have had, or if they've been, brought up in like the FBI groups in a negative manner so many ways, or if it's a breeder that I've talked to personally that I know has some sketchy shit going on, then I'll definitely steer them in a better direction. Obviously, people are going to do what they want to do, but if we can tell them, like this is the kind of stuff that they work with, so that's not ethical. If they're selling geckos too young, they're pushing their geckos. If you can see sometimes when they share videos that if the geckos either aren't getting supplemented properly or the parents weren't, because it happens with some, babies that hatch out with MBD. It does happen, but it's not extremely common. So if they have that recurring, then I would maybe question it a little bit, or maybe that breeder just needs additional help as far as, somebody with more experience pointing it out, not, giving them a message. And, that's what I was saying earlier. There's these new breeders that they're talking, instead of talking about, oh, I'm pairing this, they're talking about what they're supplementing, what they're feeding, what they're gut loading, and going over that kind of stuff rather than, oh, I'm so excited to pair these like as soon as possible. But yeah, definitely do your own research if you find a breeder you think you like. A lot of people recommend Morph Market Immediately, which is a great place, but they'll let anybody post on there. So you really gotta, when you find a breeder, see if they have any other, if they have a website, if they're on Instagram or Facebook, look up their pages like Seth said, leave some comments. If you see, someone's had experience with them, if you have something specific that they didn't really touch on.
Okay.
But that's the main thing. There's more breeders to recommend than to tell people to steer clear from. So at least that's good.
Right. Especially I think there's just small nuances that you'll see in like the top tier breeders versus the breeders that aren't doing things right when it comes to, we talked about supplementation, gut loading, but also just things of like how they pair their geckos, quarantining their geckos when they get new geckos in, things like that, that a lot of people just kind of look over, but then also like making sure they're not pairing things right out of the box, or, sending geckos that are, paired before, and things like that I've been hearing about. But yeah, some good things to think about before people, because I don't know, you guys have been introducing me to a lot of new ways that people have been doing some shady stuff.
It is, and some people might surprise you.
Instagram.
Like it's somebody that you think like, oh, they've been around a long time, and it's like, wait, they're doing that?
Yeah, it's easy to look all fancy and glittery on social media. That's just a matter of taking the right pictures at the right angles. I would. I'm willing to show people my whole collection at any point, at any given day, any given time. You know, there's full transparency here, and you know, there's just different, like we said, different ways of doing things. You know, but yeah, it's very easy to look a lot more experienced and a lot more status than you actually are or have on social media. So that's some important things to think about. Another actual red flag I was just thinking of a minute ago. You know, when you're doing that, creeping on that breeder's page, and they have, you know, pages of, you know, what do y'all think the pairings I should make this year, or, you know, what do y'all think's most popular? And that just goes back to us talking about working with what you like, and working, not worrying about the market and what's hot and what's not, you know, but just actually having a vision and having a passion and having a project, you know, of your own.
Mm-hmm. That's what you said. There's breeders and there's just producers. They and then they overproduce, and they're overwhelmed, and then they're desperate to move. And for me, like, I don't really care how many geckos you produce as long as they're properly taken care of. If you're, you know, seeming desperate to move shit, then it's like you obviously overproduced, and that's on you. And it just sucks because then, you know, they can't move them fast enough. They're selling them, you know, cheap, practically giving them away. Or they're selling them way too young because they don't have space to grow them out. And not that they can't, you know, thrive after a few weeks on their own already, but that's not what most of us are doing. You know, like.
Yeah, I think that's another good point that you said. Like, if they're getting sales on geckos and they're like doing a 20% off sale, 40% off sale every week, that should be red flag. That's, you know, someone's not doing something right.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with giving
trying too hard, like Heidi said.
Yeah. Just red flags to look out for. I think, you know, people today now, there's so much out there that it's hard to kind of see through all the smoke and mirrors, but more often than not, I think, especially on social media, if it looks too good to be true, it often is. So
definitely. Yeah.
I think it's just a thing that people should look out for now. I think this year we've seen it more just with the new influx of breeders coming out. We've seen a lot of people kind of, you know, get scammed, and people just, you know, realizing who people are for who they are as breeders. And I think that's a good way to also see, like, how much, you know, I think that's also what's so good about all of this stuff on social media. It's always out there, so it's really hard to fully get rid of stuff. You could always, you know, get rid of posts somehow, but it's hard to fully get rid of once you post something that's, you know, shady or people see it. So if that's really out there, then people could really get down and see the stuff that a lot of people are doing today. And I think, Seth, that happened with you when you were talking about your you know, your AFT stuff, when, you know, people were you know, maybe not even understanding what it was about, but they saw your integrity when it came to, you know, your past transactions and how you've upheld that high standard of breeding and being a breeder. It really vouched for when that happened. If that would have, you know, came out and then would have had a history of like breeding enigmas and lemon frost or like AFT lines that weren't healthy, it would have been a totally different story.
Yeah, people would have laughed at it. Yeah, it would have been a totally different reception.
Right.
Yeah. This is exactly that whole fat tail thing was a perfect example of, you know, I don't know. I'm trying to word it properly. There's different ways of doing things, you know, and you can try to hide things, and you can try to get away with things, and you can try to, you know, be shady with people, or you can be straight up and be honest and open and real, you know?
Right.
So
with you guys' collection, how do you guys try to be transparent and, you know, what you guys do?
Well,
what do you mean?
I think, like what Seth was just saying, his situation was kind of like bittersweet, I guess, because it was unfortunate and really sucked, but the way it was handled is a prime fucking example that people should take note of how to deal with it. Like, things can happen, and it's not like with enigmas where, oh, like, I've been breeding them and I know this could have happened. Like, you don't know. And luckily, you know, it got taken care of, and he came out and he was talking about it. But some people just, they hide it and they hide it and they say, act like everything is fine, and it's all behind closed doors. And that's the kind of thing I end up dealing with as an admin, is I get all the messages of where they got it from, what it's going through. The breeders are no help or blaming them, and it's just bullshit. It's not fair. So, you know, they get called out in my group or whatever it is, and I tell them to go over to an FBI page. Sometimes they don't feel like it, but it's like, I have to know this. And a lot of times I'll share it with other breeders. Like, this is what I'm going through right now. Like, this is why it's so frustrating. And sometimes it becomes too much. So I'll, you know, inadvertently just kind of lash out, and I'll make some posts, you know, about lemon frosts or enigma breeders and how shitty it is. That they think that they're on this higher pedestal for some reason, and what they're doing is somehow scientific, and it's not. It's sick. It's selfish.
I think the word research has been thrown around a lot when it comes to
I don't know
breeding.
what the research is that they've done. I mean,
everybody's a scientist these days.
I know, like, I don't know, are they handing out degrees somewhere, or just everybody's a researcher?
I mean,
Well, speaking of one of those researchers, I actually got one of them on the phone. That he who we shall not name, who's actively working with Lemon Frost. I got him on the phone.
He's actually on the line right now. Let me bring him in.
I actually got him on the phone a while back, not too very long ago, and tried to speak some sense into him. And one thing I threw out to, because he's trying to give me all these, you know, oh well, I'm trying to research and you know, scientific, and we got to document this and that. And I was like, and he told me how many dozens of lemon frosts he has already that he's created. And I threw out an option to him. I was like, all right, man, look, you've got this, you know, 4th generation of this project now produced. That harm is done already. But if you insist on moving forward with it, why not take the most responsible approach of shutting down the production of them, not producing anymore, and sitting back and watching these grow for 2 years, and letting this 2nd, 3rd, and 4th generation get 5, 4, and 3 years old. You know what I mean? And actually see if you're, you know, supposedly they're making improvements. They're assuming they're making improvements as they're producing more and more and more and more of them. You know, but anyway, I'm pretty sure it all fell to deaf ears, you know, as I expected it would. But it was just a feeble attempt at trying to give them another option of going the right road, going down a better road. You know, I don't know.
well, that would be great advice, except the geckos that are only a few months old already have tumors. So, and you can see, like, here's a picture. Look how healthy it is. You can see the bulges in the you know, on the shoulders and behind the ear. Like, you can see it. Like, what is it that you think that you're doing? And even if they don't protrude, like, externally so much, God knows what's happening on the inside of them still.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And sometimes you don't even notice it when they're, like, within the first year. Sometimes it takes, you know, a year before you start even seeing these things popping up, which is even a totally different story, where people are releasing them when they look good, and then a year later they're just, you know, exploding, you know, with tumors that are coming out of these geckos, which is, you know.
And it's been done. It's been done by a lot of breeders that have openly talked about it years and years ago. And then every year there's a handful of new breeders that they want to take it on too. So they breed it to a different morph, or they bring in this other subspecies, and the same shit happens. So then it's like, what do you?
And you can't.
You're going to keep outcrossing for 10 years, and then it's not even. I don't.
And you can't even point them at the horror stories that were a few years ago, because they've already disappeared. You know what I mean? Like, we see the same thing every couple of years. We see somebody that's, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a change. And it's like, oh yeah, there was somebody exactly like you about 2 years ago, and you can't even find a page if you search anymore. Yeah, you're right. It probably is.
Same person. He or they show up every few years with this bullshit project. and then they vanish, like literally vanish.
Yeah. We'll probably have to
Yeah.
fill Evan in on who we're talking about there, because I don't think he was even around whenever they first
He wasn't.
came and
He
went.
wasn't. But we talked
I think I have an idea, but yeah, it's just history repeating itself.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
They just
Yep.
changed their name, and they all. What's funny is they all have multiple profiles. That's another thing. If you find a breeder and you actually can find out what their name is, most of us are open about it. But if you find a breeder, find their name, look up how many profiles they have. Because you'll have people that have multiple profiles, spelling their name a little bit. It's like, why? It's sketchy as shit. Like, they get blocked from places, or they obviously, there's a reason. There's no reason to have that many. But yeah, it's the same thing. It's trying to talk somebody out of it. If they're already doing it, they don't stop. They just end up leaving and disappearing at some point. But we just have to
And
indulge
flooding their
feel.
deformed geckos into the market.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. A lot of people just blindly follow these people because they start off on YouTube, and there's not that many YouTubers that are creating actual, like, legitimate content for leopard geckos these days, really. A lot of it is just basic care, but some of the breeders that are putting stuff out there have no idea what they're talking about. And I'm not interested in doing that, so I can't really bitch about it too much, but it does suck because people go to YouTube before they search anywhere else these days. So they find these breeders on there, and then they start following them on all the social media, and that's how they get all these followers. And then you try and say, like, hey, no, like, what they're doing isn't cool. It is not science. Like, it is bullshit. And then they don't stop at that either. They do all this other, like, unethical pairings or whatever with, multiple males in a single season or whatever the fuck. It doesn't make any sense. It's not necessary. If you don't have the patience to wait the next season to prove out a female, then yeah. I just don't care for that at all.
Yeah. I feel like every year that, you start seeing things as a breeder, like, more, it's just never gets old. It's either the same thing repeating or someone is creating up new stuff just to stir the pot.
Well, that's all it is.
Yeah,
it's a cycle.
Yep. It's usually this exact same thing, and they think that they're the first. Well, nobody's tried this. Yes, they have. They just deleted all their crap and they were proved wrong.
Yeah, you just weren't around whenever they tried it.
Like, there are pages, breeders, they were around just a couple of years. You can't find a trace of them now.
Yeah. They just disappear.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. Yeah, and I think even, like, today you see people, like, getting into these cycles, and they're so insistent and so persistent about what they know or what they don't know. But I think what they don't realize is because they don't even look back into talking with other breeders about, hey, if you're just, I think, Seth, if you were to go, if someone new said, well, like, hey, I heard about this thing, like, can you explain a little bit more? I know you'd be more than happy to, explain the history of this thing, like why exactly it didn't work. Heidi, I know you're the same way, but I think you don't see that. People just go and say, well, if I don't try it myself, then how do I know? But it's like, if you hear from multiple people, the same reputable people that are telling you, hey, like, this is why you shouldn't do this. Like, look back, like, these are these examples that have happened in the past, and all of that stuff, and make these connections with breeders. You get these same people that are falling into the same trap of blindly following people without even, hearing any evidence of what these people are doing when it comes to breeding.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sad, though.
Agreed.
Yeah. And I feel like as breeders, at least the ones that care about the hobby, not just, I know some people are more, reclusive or socially awkward. I know some breeders that they don't really post at all, but they'll have an Instagram and they have beautiful geckos, but they don't have a Facebook. They don't really talk to anybody or whatever. But when you're on all the social media, and if you have as much free time as I apparently have, if people have questions, answer them. There's so many times people ask a question, they either get no response, or they get misinformation, or, whatever it is. And it's not that hard. If you're already scrolling and you're going to type, you might as well be helpful. And if somebody reaches out to you personally, it's kind of our responsibility to lead them down the right path. What they actually do with the info you gave them is out of your hands, but there's no reason not to be honest and transparent about any of it, especially if you don't have shit to hide.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing about transparency. It's the people who aren't transparent are the ones with things to hide. It's always the same story that we've seen with people and a lot of people. Even when it comes to just like setups, I know like the people who show their setups on social media have no issue because they have, you know, nice cages. Not every cage obviously is going to be like squeaky cleaned and freshly, you know, fresh everything, but those breeders who have, you know, their enclosures and they're fine with people going into their, you know, collections or showing pictures of their geckos in, you know, whatever they have, their rack set up and stuff like that. Those are the breeders that you see who typically have the best relationships when it comes to customers, but also just like healthy animals. Today, like it's so crazy how you see so many breeders with animals that aren't healthy with so much information that we have with gecko. So from you guys' standpoint, like, how do you guys think people today should just like go about just something as simple as that? Like, people have so much trouble with that, but like, what would you guys, you know, give advice for with people who can't even get around? They're already into breeding, but it can't even, you know, care for the gecko the right way.
Stop. Stop.
That was the answer I was
Rewind.
looking for.
Stop and rewind.
Well, I mean, even if they've already done a pairing or they just hatched their first, like, you can still, I mean, obviously you can't go back, but you can stop incubating any further eggs. Especially if you have no idea what you're doing or can't handle it, or the babies come out all wonky and, you know, you can stop. A lot of people don't want to hear that. Like, oh, I just got this gecko, it laid eggs, I'm going to incubate them. It's like, well, are you going to be prepared? And if they're fertile, she's probably going to lay more. So you could have anywhere from 2 to 10 babies just for her. So if you're prepared to take care of each one, you know, appropriately, then, you know, by all means. But if you can't, then don't do it. Like, don't just feel bad. Like, oh, well, I don't want to kill. There's nothing in there. It's a few cells. Like, you know, so a lot of people get right away like, well, they're killing babies. And no, you're not.
Now,
So it's like, you know, you freeze them and...
to be fair, Evan, I was that guy. I was that guy 8 years ago that had a 40-gallon breeder with full of sand and 3 unknown genetic geckos in there. I mean, full transparency. And I quickly realized as I started looking into, you know, once I hatched my first gecko and had actual interest in it, once I started looking into things, I quickly realized how many things I was doing wrong and how many ways I needed to change what I was doing. So I think it's really just a matter of the individual and their willingness to change or take advice or realize that they're doing things wrong. And like the way it worked out for me was I had that set up. I hatched a single gecko my first year, and it was a blizzard. And I brought it to the first expo I went to and showed the first gecko breeder that I met what I had and what I had hatched. And I thought it was something really special. And he was like, yeah, it's a blizzard. Cool. And I was like, well, what do you think I should pair it to? And he's like, nothing. And he was straight up blunt honest with me and told me exactly what we tell people all the time, in that, you know, you're starting with animals that aren't going to really be worth working with in the long run. And so it was a big wall I ran into, and it was hard to swallow that and accept that, but I did. And I bought a pair of geckos from him, and that was the first legit geckos I bought was from him. And he's the one that gave me the advice that I kick to everybody of work with what you like, you know? And that's my story there, you know? So I guess I'm just pointing that out because I don't want it to seem like we're shunning anybody that starts off the wrong way, or, you know, because everybody comes from somewhere and everybody starts somewhere, and not everybody has access to Heidi's group when they first start, or access to this podcast when they first start, and, you know, and things like that. Like, there's so many resources that we have at our fingertips that if we want to learn about something, a new species or whatever, we've been in the reptile industry and the hobby long enough that we know where to go to look for the right information and how to weed out and decipher that correct information. But I think sometimes we forget how naive people can be when they first get into things or when they're first diving into reptiles in general, which, let's be clear, we work with an entry-level species. And so a lot of the people that get the animals that we produce is their first reptile they've ever owned. And I think part of it is our responsibility to help guide those people to the right resources. And the other part of it is obviously their responsibility of listening to the right resources and changing their ways if they're already off to a wrong start.
Yeah.
I think that's a great.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, that's great. That's a great point to put up. Like, you have to realize where people are starting from, and a lot of people start off that. Like, my first gecko's PetSmart gecko, and from that standpoint, a lot of people really get lost in, figuring out, and even a lot of people get turned off by that if they post that they just get attacked, and that's probably something that Heidi sees a lot, and we've all even seen that people get attacked. So really pointing those people in the right direction instead of just saying like you're wrong, like that's not doing anything for anybody. So that's just my opinion on that. Yeah,
there's certain ways to approach people. There's a right and wrong way to approach people about it. And if you come out with, "Oh, you idiot, what are you doing?" they're not going to hear you, and they're certainly not going to hear the right things from you. But if you come out with, hey, that's a beautiful gecko, but, if you have interest in breeding and you want to go about, and you want to get into this, I would suggest from my personal experience that you look at this, and you start educating them on that. And, it's all about how the conversation starts. Is how they're going to perceive the information they're receiving. And that's what's going to dictate where the conversation goes from there, in my eyes.
Heidi, were you going to say something?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'm going to get on my high horse here because I did a ton of research before I was addicted to watch YouTube. I watched, Sesselbeck, David's Fine Geckos. I watched all of that stuff for a couple of years before I did it. So I knew it.
Well, I did that after the Petco gecko.
No, I didn't. I never got a Petco gecko. I never had a rescue gecko. My first geckos I ordered from Ron Tremper, and I ordered from David's Fine Geckos. And that is how I started. But
Miss Fancy Pants.
No, I'm just saying. I'm just proud of that. I grew up. Really,
you should be proud. That's the right way to do things.
Not everybody.
That is the right way to do things.
Literally every episode that Evan does, how'd you get into it? Oh, they got Petco geckos or rescue geckos, or somebody gifted them a gecko, and that's how they started. So I've always been really proud that I did, acquire my geckos right off the bat that way, and their setups and supplement. Like, I did everything. I still had my own hiccups to work out, but as far as a beginner, I'm really proud of that. But I do understand that's not how the majority gets their geckos or gets started off, which is why I created my group 5-6 years ago, because everybody was trying to look for that help that the pet store's not giving them, or they rescued a gecko because they wanted to help it, but then they don't know what to do. So I realized they need somewhere where they can get the proper education from, hopefully. And we try to keep things updated as possible. We're always open to new methods of stuff as long as it's not going to hurt them in any way. Like, we're open to everything. But yeah, a lot of people, every day we get a post that they just got this gecko from PetSmart. This is the stuff they were told to buy. So it's very repetitive. We'll get someone, they'll join the group. That's the first thing they ask. So, which it's, like I said, it's repetitive, but I'm glad they did it. Majority of them will change everything within a matter of weeks. Some of them are really reluctant to do anything. But most of them are really open to changing it, and they're grateful for the info. Everyone is pretty friendly. If you're not, they get booted. We don't need you to sugarcoat or hold anyone's hand, but you need to be civil. You need to be respectful. That's all.
Easy and simple. Yeah. Totally agree with what you guys are saying. It's crazy, like, how, again, like we said, it's just cycles. We see the same thing of people getting, how they're using Facebook to degrade people, and we all started from somewhere. Obviously Heidi Did her research.
Not
did a
when
little
I,
bit
when
more
I was
work.
younger. When I was way younger, though, my grandma got me those Anoles. I told you the first
Right,
episode
yeah.
I wanted that Komodo dragon. She got me a Knowles, and I didn't know what to do, but she got a typical setup with, some bark on the bottom, vines and stuff, and I was throwing crickets in there, and they lived for quite a while. And then I ended up getting a bearded dragon for my cousin, and I took care of that for like 6 years, but it was in a 40-gallon. Like, that's not appropriate for an adult bearded dragon, as by today's standards. So I will say that, like, I have other reptiles that were given to me as a child, but when I was old enough to, like, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm in love with, because I went to the exotic pet store all growing up, and I always wanted them, just never got them. And then I'm like, okay, cool, I'm an adult, I can get what I want to get.
By the way, Heidi's still working on that Komodo dragon, just in case anybody's wondering.
Well, I'm actually, I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I love, what is it, a white throat lace monitor? I would love that. Just to, like, hold. I have 80-pound dogs that I hold, so a big monitor would be, or a tegu. I would like a tegu.
The one of the Sea Life Rescue place down here in Corpus Christi, by where we do one of our expos, they used to have a adult black throat monitor, and he was
crazy.
a huge sweetheart. He was awesome. But he ended up passing away not too long ago. But he was really neat.
Yeah, those big monitors, those black dragons are those fully melanistic, those things are crazy. So it's like having a little dinosaur almost. But Heidi, if you ever get one of those Komodos, we should be the first to know.
That was just the first, like, reptile that I actually knew what it was, and I was, like, addicted to it. I was probably like 5. I was watching Wild Discovery, and I'm like, oh my god, look at that, and I wanted it so bad.
They actually have a interactive exhibit with Komodo dragons at the San Antonio Zoo. Like, you can pay extra to go and like do, like, with the keeper, like, in the enclosure with him and stuff.
It's crazy.
That'd be right up your alley, Heidi.
Sheesh.
Yeah, well, I promised.
Whenever y'all make it down here,
It would work out because our kids are like the same age.
I don't have kids, so I'd be with the kids.
Well, yeah,
I sit at the kid table.
We'll adopt you.
I am taking up foster paper, so if anybody's interested listening, preferably a reptile household, but anything will work.
right?
I know, still never had dogs. I know we were talking about that last time. Eventually get split out to some other stuff.
Here, does it let me flip this? Do you know?
I've never done it on a phone before.
I don't know. Look at my dog.
Sweetheart.
He's just been sitting here staring at me. Now he won't work. Tighten. Baby. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
He's just sitting on the chair on my foot.
Just chilling out.
Foot warmer.
How many dogs do you have, Seth?
Technically 3 at the moment. One of them is a pit bull that I'm kind of fostering for my sister. She's in the oil field, so kind of pretty much adopted him at this point. He's actually laying here at my feet, staring at the baby geckos. He's infatuated with the geckos. He lays in here and just watches them for hours. But yeah, we got 3 total with him. I got a Malinois mix for my boys, and then the wife has a little Cairn Terrier that I can't stand.
Can't stand your wife or the dog? I'm just kidding.
Let's go with the dog for now.
Oh,
No, I'm joking. Carrie's awesome. Carrie's amazing. I'm very lucky.
yes.
Next round table we'll have a dog crossover episode.
I already showed mine.
I'll get my research done by then. Awesome. Well, guys, I appreciate you guys getting on. We have to do another one soon. Like, it's just tons of fun just catching up, and you guys have totally awesome experiences with, Leos and everything like that. So we definitely got to get more of these going for next season.
For sure.
Yeah.
Had a good time.
Anytime, as long as Seth doesn't cancel.
Hey, I'd have been falling asleep on y'all a couple weeks ago. Seriously, I was in need for some catch up.
That's fine. We probably needed a couple weeks to cool down anyway. I was a little bit livid the past few weeks with other situations, so
Right.
I didn't want to be all crap on here.
Yeah, Heidi would have unleashed the Kraken. That's gecko drama for you guys. Well, if you guys have anything else you guys want to say, appreciate you guys. If you guys haven't listened to the other episodes with both Heidi and Seth, make sure they have both individual episodes on here, and then also roundtables that we've done. If you guys are interested, can you guys just say your business names, and then also if anybody wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do that?
So yeah, we've got. Go ahead. Go
ahead.
No, you first.
Oh, Jesus.
Ladies first.
Okay. What? I'm Xeno Gecko Morphs. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. On Instagram is an underscore under each word, so Xeno _ Gecko Morphs. And then I have an email for that too, but nobody emails me. I have Morph Market page, and I also run a few groups. My main one is Leopard Gecko Club. I have Leopard Gecko Breeders Club, and then Seth and I run a couple bold stripe groups. Bold and striped leopard geckos, and then I believe it's all things bold stripe.
All bolds,
Something like
bolds and stripes.
I didn't make that name.
Yeah, all bolds and stripes.
I didn't make that one, but just look up bold stripes, you'll find it. Or if you join one of my groups, all the other groups are linked.
Nice.
And I'm just Huff's Herps, Facebook and Instagram. And email is huffsherps@yahoo.com. HUFFSHERPS.
Sweet.
@yahoo.com.
Nice. Thank you guys again for being on the show, and we will, as long as Seth is on time in here, we'll have him on next time.
Gotta catch me between expos.
And this is going to conclude this episode with Heidi and Seth. I really want to thank them for coming onto the podcast again and really just sharing their years of knowledge and advice to all of us today. And as you guys know, at the end of each and every episode, I do my one big thing. In this episode, my one big thing kind of goes back to what both Heidi and Seth said about just seeking advice and asking reputable and knowledgeable breeders in this hobby. It's pretty easy nowadays to tell who's really knowledgeable and really ethical when it comes to breeding. If you're really unsure, I would just go and reach out to, the people that I've had on this podcast, people that I trust, obviously, to come on the podcast, and, people on social media who have been doing this for a while. And just, I think today it's easy to equate followers to knowledge in the hobby, or followers to, the amount of knowledge or, just prestige in this hobby when it comes to ethics. But it's not always true. So I'd make sure to reach out to multiple different sources to really just get a full story of certain things when it comes to breeding ethics, and, just how to do things the right way and in a way that's filled with integrity and honesty in this hobby, which I think just makes everything a lot easier for everybody involved in the process of, breeding, of purchasing. There's so many things that we could talk about, but that's my one big thing for this episode of the podcast. I want to thank everyone for joining us on yet another episode of the Strength in Leos podcast. Don't forget to share with a friend, rate our podcast, and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Strength in Leos. And last but not least, tune in next time for our next episode on Spotify, iTunes, Google Music, and our website, strengthinleos.com. This is your host, Evan Wooldridge, signing off. Continue to grow in knowledge and share the strength in Leo.